Hello everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the 2015 MacBook Air and see how this particular device holds up in 2025. Now it's been about 10 years since this MacBook came out, which is pretty insane because when it kind of comes down to it, this particular device, it is one of those types of Macs that, it came and went, but it was a very, very impactful MacBook. Because we didn't get another MacBook after this for like another 3 years. Like we didn't get another MacBook Air. So we weren't too sure if Apple was going to continue this lineup, if they were, if they weren't. Guess what? They ended up doing it and they gave us a way better MacBook in return. But with the 2015 MacBook Air, this was still a really good selling MacBook. It was fairly popular as well. And the main reason for this was because people just wanted to go through and be able to buy a MacBook like this and be able to have it, run as well as it did, to have like a powerful Mac. And I will tell you in a lot of ways, this Mac did hold up fairly well, but there are some other ways where this MacBook really isn't necessarily worth buying anymore either. So we'll take a look at that throughout this whole entire video. First things first, if you do want to go ahead and pick up a MacBook, any MacBook Air for the most part, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the 2015 MacBook Air, this MacBook came out in kind of two different sizes. It came out in a 13-inch size and an 11-inch size, which was actually pretty insane because at that moment, if you were to go through and pick up some of these types of MacBooks, it is kind of insane that you could have had an 11-inch Mac because now we have like iPads that are like 11 inches and 13 inches. So it's pretty insane that that was the case. With this one though, the 13-inch model, this was probably one of the more popular ones. So at the very top of this MacBook, you weren't really getting anything super crazy. This was basically like a, standard type of, Apple logo at the very top. So it looked pretty much what you'd expect like before. It was also, like I said before, a pretty, interesting type of layout because it was so thin. You were getting your port selections on the side, which even at that point, these ports were really, really nice to have. And I love being able to go through and buy these types of MacBooks that are giving me these types of port selections. So on one side, you were getting your MagSafe port, which was really, really cool. I love being able to go through and just, still have MagSafe even on these older Macs. So that was something that was really awesome going on for this type of Mac from that side. You're also going to go through and get a USB Type-A port on the left side and a headphone jack. So that right there was another really cool thing. Once again, being able to have that I/O from that perspective again, it was a really, really cool thing in and of itself. On top of that, you were able to go through and you were essentially able to, on the right side, get another USB Type-A port, and you were able to get a Thunderbolt port as well. So this was another really cool thing going on for this type of Mac too. Once again, being able to go through and get that type of capability was another really awesome thing. And like I said before, you were essentially getting that here on this particular Mac. On top of that, another important thing, you were able to go through and get another USB Type-A port on the right side as well. On the bottom, you were essentially getting just your standard feet that you normally would inside of your device, so nothing really changed there. And I will still tell you, in a lot of ways, the exterior of this Mac still held up fairly well, right? It still feels like a moderately expensive device, which still is really nice to have. So if you were to go through and pick up this type of Mac, you're probably still going to be able to get like a decent experience with it, which I think is a very important thing to keep in mind because although this thing's kind of, old now, it still feels like a pretty decent Mac. Now, on top of that, when it basically comes down to some other areas, like when you open this MacBook up, this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. So with the MacBook Air, you have to remember that this was one of those types of Macs that you were going to go ahead and buy, and it wasn't supposed to be like the Pro model, right? It was supposed to be a more affordable type of MacBook when it came down to it. So this type of Mac, what was essentially going on was that this type of MacBook was basically giving you this, full-size keyboard, which was nice. It was giving you this trackpad too, which actually held this MacBook up much better than you would have thought, because for a time there, Apple was basically getting a lot of flack for going through and only giving us like these butterfly keyboards. Well, with this MacBook, a lot of people were still buying it because it was one of the only few MacBooks that was giving you this like full-size keyboard and a full-size trackpad. So you were in a really, really good, lucky situation in that standpoint. Unfortunately, you were kind of going through and getting stuck with one of the weirder panels Apple's ever made. So these MacBook Air panels were very, very pixelated. They weren't really the best looking MacBook panels either. So that was kind of one of the issues that you were kind of running into inside of this type of device, was that it just looked and felt like a little bit more outdated than you'd probably want it to look. So although it's not the biggest deal in the world, that could be a very, very annoying thing you might end up running into. So for me personally, that was kind of an issue. And, I do actually prefer having a MacBook Air or a MacBook that's giving you a Retina display. And that was kind of the biggest thing here that happened when you were to go through and pick up one of these newer MacBooks, like a newer MacBook Retina, Retina MacBook Air. Those ones are basically going through and giving you a better experience there from that side. So that was one of those big things to keep in mind here, because the display was probably one of the biggest turnoffs here for most people out there. But I will still say for a lot of people, when you're looking at this type of MacBook Air, an advantage you could probably think about is probably the fact that it's gone down in value so much. So the fact that these MacBooks are so much cheaper now, you could probably look at these types of MacBooks from that side and think to yourself that you probably are getting like a pretty decent deal, because these things aren't really that expensive anymore. So you could probably think about it from that side, like, okay, like it's an older MacBook Air and the display is not that good, but you probably would expect it at that point. So that could be one way to look at it. But the other way to look at it too is that, the fact that this MacBook Air is already outdated with software doesn't really mean that this thing is that great of a deal anymore either. The fact that this thing is already done getting software updates, you don't really have that much more to look forward to with this type of Mac. So you're kind of stuck in the situation where it's like, well, like, why would you even buy it if it's already done getting software updates? And that's the situation that you kind of find yourself in over and over again. That's why I really would recommend people to think twice before buying these types of Macs, because you might run into this situation where you buy it and then you kind of regret it because these Macs are giving you basically like, no software updates or not that great of performance. Even from there, this MacBook was giving you like 1.6 gigahertz dual core processor with 4 or 8 gigs of RAM. They maxed out at 8 gigabytes of RAM. Most Macs now are pretty much giving you at least like 8 gigs of RAM starting off with. Definitely probably more than that. Mostly the MacBook Pros are giving you like 16 gigs of RAM. So definitely from that side too, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to go and buy a Mac like this, because it's just going to already be giving you like an outdated type of experience. So once again, what would be the point even of buying a Mac like this if you can go through and buy a better Mac, right? So that's the kind of situation, because definitely from a performance perspective, you might be able to still have like a decent experience and a decent time with it, but I would just hate for you to go through and buy one of these types of Macs if it's already outdated with performance and if it's already outdated with software. So that's kind of the tricky situation. If you were to dock this thing and just kind of use it as like a side device, maybe for data management or for some light web scrolling or something like that, you might be okay with it. Like you might be all right with it. But even then, I just feel like from a security standpoint situation, I wouldn't even recommend buying this MacBook from that side, because you might already be running into a situation where it's already done getting security updates and software updates. You don't want to have like a insecure, unsecure device when you're, using it. So in my opinion, when I look at this Mac, right, I genuinely think there are better options out there to buy rather than this MacBook. I think like a 2020 M1 MacBook Air is a really good option. I think a 2020 M1 MacBook Pro is also a very good option. Those things, yes, are more expensive than this Mac, but it still would make a lot of sense to go through and buy it, because those ones are going to be giving you just a better, powerful, more secure experience. So that's the way I would recommend a majority of people to go through and kind of, buy. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense to go through and buy this type of MacBook anymore, because it's so old, because it's so outdated. So from that side, that kind of covers it up for the most part. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out, Solon.